Our next storyteller is Christina Fisanick. Christina, who has a PhD in English, is a professor and author from Wheeling, West Virginia. She's a 1996 graduate of West Liberty University. Her writing primarily focuses on her experiences with mental illness, including her most recent book, The Optimistic Food Addict, Recovering from Binge Eating Disorder. She loves cats and spending time with her beloved son, Tristan. Please join me in welcoming Christina Fisanick.
Thunder thighs, big girl, chubby, fatty, butterball, husky, fat pig, gross, disgusting. These are some of the words that people have used to describe me over the course of my life. In fact, the body focus name calling began just hours after I first drew breath. My mother tells the story of how the pediatric nurses chided my newborn thighs in the nursery. "Look how big they are, Mama, and she is such a little baby otherwise." And so it continued until I heard the voices of others louder than my own, until the insults and jibes drowned out the compliments. By the time I went on a class swimming trip at age 9, the invectives had done their worst. I was so embarrassed about how my 4th grade body would look in a bathing suit that I sat on a bench at the pool in the sweltering heat of that early fall day, watching my classmates splash and play. I was so ashamed of my little girl form that I denied myself the simple pleasure of swimming with my friends. I was 9 years old. Of course, the voices only intensified as I made my way towards puberty and began developing bigger hips and breasts. By the time I was sexually assaulted at age 11, I could no longer find anything positive about my body, and the body dysmorphia led to binge eating disorder. To hide from my pain, I ate. To shield myself from bullies, I ate. To escape negative, intrusive thoughts, I ate. Food became my best friend and my worst enemy. As I grew into adulthood, I tried every diet I could find, which led to weight fluctuations of hundreds and hundreds of pounds over the years. My weight and my body had become the enemy and the source of all that was wrong in my life. But I could not stop binging for long. Every trauma pushed me back into the food. When my daughter was murdered when I was 18 years old, I ate. When my son died a decade later, I ate. When I struggled through poverty and stress in my doctoral program, I ate. When my home burned down and took the lives of my 6 cats, I ate. I ate because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to find comfort any other way. I had read all of the self-help books. I had been to countless therapists. I had many friends to call for reassurance. And yet my disease, binge eating disorder, led me to believe that food was the only true source of peace. But like any addict knows, this disease lies. Food was making me sick. Binge eating disorder was slowly taking my life, and the little comfort I received was from food that was replaced by the guilt and the shame before I ever took my last bite. Then one night, around 3 a.m., when my son was just a few years old, I found myself sitting on the living room floor eating my 3rd bowl of homemade buttercream frosting. I was crying, and I felt sick. It didn't even taste good anymore, but I kept eating and eating and crying and eating. I realized in that moment, for the first time in more than 30 years of harming myself with food, that I had a serious psychological problem that had nothing to do with a lack of willpower. I needed help. I turned to the National Eating Disorders Association, and they connected me with one of their navigators who helped me understand binge eating disorder and steps that I could take to find treatment. I entered recovery from binge eating disorder shortly thereafter, and as anyone who has been through recovery knows, that first year to year and a half is both horrible and exhilarating. After the first month of withdrawal and grief, I got high on recovery and soon felt invincible. I felt like I had won, that I had beaten binge eating disorder for good. And then one morning, while walking into a local coffee shop, a table full of men ogled me in such a way in such a sexually overt way that I wanted to climb out of my own body. I wanted to run away. Suddenly, I was that 11-year-old girl again, facing my rapist. I got my coffee and left. I cried during the entire hour's drive to work. 3 months later, I found myself sitting in the car just down the street from my house, eating a jar of marshmallow cream with my hands, white sticky sugar all over my face and work clothes. I was once again deep in the food and deep in my mental illness. And those voices that said hurtful things about my body were back, and in such a foment that I could hear little else. My mind was so dark that I could barely function. I struggled with work, I struggled with home, I struggled with basic self-care. I was sicker than I had ever been before. Then one afternoon, a friend reached his hand out to me. In the same way I had reached my hand out to the thousands of group members who turned to me for support in their recovery journey, I took his hand and he pulled me out of the darkness, little by little. I know that psychologists often tell us that happiness is better found inside ourselves, but my friend made me realize that sometimes we need someone to go into the dark and find us, to help us believe that our lights are worth shining, that we are beautiful, that we are worth the tremendous effort it takes to find recovery once again. I know now that there is no cure for binge eating disorder, but there is hope. There are times when I string together more good days than bad days, more joyful weeks than sad weeks, more peaceful months than chaotic months. As I continue on this journey called life, I know only one thing for sure. Right now, right in this moment, I am free of the thoughts that have hurt me for so long. I am free of compulsive behaviors with food. I have only my breath and the sound of my own beautiful voice telling you my story.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thanks for shedding light on binge eating disorder.